What statue has an 879 size shoe?
We're going to show you today. Hello and welcome to Around the World with Joshua and Alyssa. And we are in our 5-week series of looking at New York City. So last week we showed you what public transportation is like there, especially with the subways. And today we're going to show you one of our favorite monuments there.
Yep.
So if you go into the bay that is right there in New York City, you will be greeted with the sight of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
Also known as Lady Liberty Enlightening the World. So we took the ferry out there, and you have to pay for the ferry to get to the island. And if you pay 30 more cents, you can go inside the pedestal. So I would highly encourage you, if you're going to go, pay the extra 30 cents and go inside and climb up right to the feet of the Statue of Liberty. And in case you didn't already figure it out, the statue has size 879
Shoes.
Yeah.
She's got huge feet.
So the Statue of Liberty was a gift from the country of France to the United States. France was wanting its own independence, and they also helped America out in the war for independence. And so they thought this would be a fitting gift from one country to another. We're not going to go into all the history of it. You can look that up. It's really fascinating when you stop to learn all about it. So as I mentioned, we went up into the pedestal, and this is the view from the back looking out on this really nice, I don't know what you would call that.
Like a patio, kind of?
Yeah. And this big, long courtyard type area with the flag at the end. And as you can see, those 2 points beneath the picture, this was a fort that was built here on this island, and it was one of many forts protecting the bay from incoming ships to the port, and it's an 11-pointed star. And they kept the fort and built the Statue of Liberty right on top of it. Great view of New York City, and what is that? Is that Lower Manhattan? Or
I think so.
I'm not good with all my New York City boroughs. But that's a really nice view there from the pedestal. And if you go, they have a new museum. It's like 2 years old.
It's really nice.
And that's at the end of that long courtyard type area that we showed you. And the museum is free, and it tells you all about the history of the statue and how it has really been an icon for America for so many years now. And so this is just showing a few of the ways that people have used that Statue of Liberty as a way to advertise or as a way to sell products. Of course, my favorite one is the Lego one there that I do not own, sadly. They also show you how they formed the structure. And I did not realize this, but the Statue of Liberty, the thickness of the copper is only about 2 pennies thick, that whole thing. And so they showed you how they put it into these forms and they pounded it out into what we have today. Here is a full-size replica of the Statue of Liberty's feet. And as you can see, she wears flip-flops. And this is what the color would have been of the statue when they first brought it over, before it turned green. They have a sign here telling us how when it was 100 years old, they did some restoration on it and did a nice celebration. And also the torch, you can go up inside the torch. They don't let people go up anymore. But it has gone through many different forms throughout the years. Originally, it was not made to light up. Well, it was made to light up, Statue of Liberty was actually a lighthouse
Mm-hmm.
at one time. And then over the years, it took different shapes as the torch. I don't remember what it was originally, what it was made out of.
I don't know. Different things, like it had leaks in it, or certain things wouldn't work the way they had planned on having them worked, and so they had to keep changing it. But this was one of the torches.
This was one of them that was like the worst design, actually, because it was made up of several stained glass windows that were extremely leaky. So
then it added problems with water on the inside.
Yeah, so this was not a good design, and they took this one down at the centennial celebration in 1976 or whenever that was, and replaced it with the one they have now, which is just a gold leaf torch, which was actually what the sculptor wanted originally, and
got voted down.
Yeah. So there we are. You should definitely visit the Statue of Liberty and the accompanying island there, Ellis Island, which was where they processed many of the immigrants for many, many years as they came into America. We actually did not get over to that one this time because we spent so much time at the statue and in the museum.
Yep.
So, pretty cool place.
That was my first time being at the Statue of Liberty. I've only been at like the park where you can see the statue from a distance, so I was really excited to
you
actually
didn't even go to the
it.
island?
No.
I thought you went to the island but didn't go inside it.
No.
Oh.
I'd only been to the park. I think maybe I had been on one of those ferry boats that just does like a loop.
Okay.
But you don't actually get to the island. So that was my first time actually on the island and getting that close to the statue, which was pretty cool. I was really excited we got to do that. And we spent a lot of time there. I didn't realize there was that much to see on the island other than just like the statue. We basically did the day there.
Yeah.
A good chunk of the day.
Yep. But it's really neat because it's one of those places you see in pictures and you see it in movies and
books, and it's referenced in a lot of things, especially anything regarding like immigrants.
And then you go there and you get to see it for real.
It's pretty amazing. Okay, we got some more stories.
All right.
So, last time we were talking about Betty. We kind of did her story of how her family was missionaries, and then how she grew up and how she felt like God was maybe calling her back to go to China someday. And then we stopped there, and now we're going to back up a little bit, and we're going to tell another story about another person. Maybe you remember from last week. She saw a guy, and she was like, man, he kind of looks like a nice person, and she had like a little poem, and she thought, I feel like this guy kind of fits that poem. So we're going to tell the story now of John. And we're going to back up to when he was a little boy, kind of like we did with Betty. So John was a boy who grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, and his family's house was up on a hill. So they could look out over the hill and they could see all the other houses in the area. And the best part was when it was summertime, they could go way up in the top of the house in like this little attic space, and they could sometimes even see New York City from on a clear day just because of where they were. But they liked looking out over the valley and seeing all the other houses. But today, John had a big job. He had to shovel the walkway for his family. And he looked up at the sky and he thought, that sky looks like more snow. I'm just going to be shoveling all day. He really loved sledding. That's what he really wanted to do. But he had to shovel the snow because his dad was coming home and bringing a guest to their house that night. So he just kept working and shoveling, and eventually he got it done. And then headed inside when his father got home with the guest. And they all sat down for their meal, and before they were going to eat their food, his father turned to the guest and he said, would you like to be part of this tradition? Our family always takes time to read 3 verses from the Bible. And if you make a mistake, then you lose your turn. So you got to read very carefully. And the guest said, yes, I would love to read verses with you, but it's going to be hard for me. I'm not used to speaking so much English. From just getting back from Africa. It's been a long time since I've used so much English, but I will do my best. So he read verses, and each one of the family members, each one of John's 7 siblings, so there were 8 kids altogether, got a chance to read some verses. And then they began their meal. And it was so exciting to hear these stories. This missionary had so many great stories about the things that God was doing and his adventures in Africa, and John thought it was really cool to hear about what was happening. And the missionary said, you know, I think you probably know this because you guys are very involved in ministry here, but sometimes it's amazing to think that back when you get saved, God has all these plans for you, but you just don't even know them. And John's dad nodded too. He said, yes, the same thing happened to me. I was a carpenter when I came from Holland, and I didn't know how God was going to use me. And then he had me start preaching to people, and then the group was getting too big, and then we had to build a building, and now we have these meetings almost every day, and we do these meetings to encourage people, and my children are very involved. Each one of them is helping out. He named off some of the older ones, and the missionary looked at John and he said, is this one next? Is he going to help you too? And John says, I think he will. All my children will. They'll all be good workers. And the missionary said, one of the best things, though, is seeing how God will provide in whatever the circumstances. That kind of stuck with John and his siblings a little bit. A few days later, it was Sunday, and after the family got home from church, they couldn't do any loud or rambunctious activities. They had to do quiet activities on a Sunday afternoon. And John was disappointed because that snow was just calling him outside, and he needed to get out there with his sled. But instead, he just spent time looking at a book or looking at a picture finder or just doing some little simple quiet activities with his siblings. One of his younger siblings asked him, he said, John, do you think that someday you would want to be a missionary? John was like, well, I don't know. It seems like it's an awful lot of work. You got to do all these things and learn all this stuff, and I don't know. I think I just want to stick with what I'm doing for school. I'm just going to stick with learning business because that's always a good job to have. He had finished a certain part of his schooling, and now he was focusing more, a couple years, just on learning about business, and he really liked it. So he thought that's just what he was going to do with his life. But his sibling said, well, don't you remember that missionary was saying, like, it's really amazing to see how God provides? What do you think he was meaning by that? John looked around. He was hoping his older siblings would have been here to answer this question, but I guess it was up to him. Well, maybe it's kind of like how when Father had a job here, God provided a new job for him when he told his boss that he couldn't work on a Sunday, and his boss told him he couldn't have this job anymore, and then he left, and another guy just hired him on the same day. God just provided for him like that. Maybe that's kind of what the missionary was saying. God will just take care of you and when you do the right things. His siblings thought that was a good answer. Well, after a little bit, he kind of wasn't doing so great with going to the meetings or going to activities and stuff with his siblings. He really wasn't wanting to have too much to do with their father's ministry to people and telling these people about God. So much so that as he was walking along the street one day, he heard some music that he knew was one of his sisters playing a little pump organ on the side of the road. And he saw some of his siblings and other people from the mission out passing out tracts, and he kind of hid in a doorway. Thought, I just don't even want to see them. I don't even want to go near them. I don't want to be part of this really at all. I just want to get my business degree and go get a good job and make money. And he watched them hand out tracts to people, and even saw one of his brothers go out to a car that had kind of come close by and was stopping, and he handed in a tract to the person in the car, and his brother had to step back really fast because the car started off driving, and the person in the car had crumpled up the tract and then threw it out in the road as they drove away. And John thought, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing all of this? This is just so silly. I don't understand this. And so little by little, he spent less and less time at those meetings. And he just got going with his job, and he was doing really great and starting to make money and learning a lot about business. Well, after a while, he ran out of excuses, and he had to go to one of the meetings with some different youth people. And as he was sitting there, he realized he was miserable. He was miserable all the time, and it was because he was allowing other things to keep him from learning about God, and he really was holding God back from doing a lot of things in his life because he hadn't trusted Jesus as his Savior. And as he listened to the speaker, he realized that he hadn't made that decision. He had just grown up in this family. He had heard about God and about church, and he had been part of helping at church, but he hadn't decided for himself that he wanted to be part of God's family. And he had kind of let it be annoying to him after a while. So that night, while these other students were hearing this speaker speak, he felt like God was speaking right to him, and he took some time to stop and pray. And he asked God to forgive him of his sin and to completely change the course of his life. And God started little by little. The first thing that happened was that his family noticed right away that there was a different attitude about him and he was more involved with his family. Well, he took on a job as a map maker, and then he started working his way up in the business and ended up in New York City, working with lots of other people in the very, very busy, bustling city. And he would take the different transportation systems, and most people were like reading fun books or doing puzzles or crosswords, and he would always bring Greek books with him to study, or some of his Bible books to study, so he could get a lot of things done even while he was on the train. But he decided as he was doing that, he really felt like God wanted him to go into ministry. So he decided he was going to go to Moody Bible Institute. So he enrolled at the Institute, and pretty soon after enrolling at the Institute, he began to hear about this group that would meet and talk about the country of China. And the leader in the group talked to them, and he said, you know, China has been a difficult place. And there have been uprisings, and people, the missionaries have been chased out of the country, and it's been a rough time. But then little by little, they've been able to move back into the areas where they had established churches. And Dr. Page said one of the most amazing things is to see that the Chinese people took over the churches and that they're running them. And they still wanted to continue to learn more about God, and the people in the church stepped up and continued to do it. So John asked, well, do we need any more missionaries in China then? And Dr. Page said, it's a huge country. There's still a lot of Chinese people that need to hear the good news about the gospel of Christ, and so we need people to go there. And John really began to think about it. China, maybe China is where you want me to go. Maybe you want me to teach the people of China about you and to help them understand that you are the one and only way to heaven. And he began to notice some of the other people in the class, and especially began to notice a girl named Betty. And he kind of began to think about her a little extra. And one night somebody was like, are you just thinking about China all the time, or is it something else? John said, well, kind of both. And Betty tried to defend him a little bit, but she was thinking the same thing. I wonder if this guy is going to be committed to going to China too. And you're going to have to come back next time to find out what happens when they start getting to know each other.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now that that's over, we're going to tell you about a missionary who was in Brazil for many years. Mm-hmm. And her name is Betty Walden. Now, here's a picture of her when she went to Brazil. This is her prayer card picture. And maybe you noticed that the last name on the card doesn't match the last name we just gave you. We'll tell you why later. So she served in Brazil at Fortaleza Academy with Baptist Missions. And Fortaleza is like the big city of the northeast of Brazil.
Is it where that little dot is on the map, kind of? There's like a greenish part of it, or is it up farther north?
It's probably farther north.
Okay.
It's really far north. In fact, when I went to Brazil for the first time, this was where I flew in. It was to Fortaleza, and then we had a really long car trip to go deeper in. But it's right on the coast, and it's one of the larger cities, and they had a school there for missionary kids, for Baptist Missions missionaries for many years. You meant the dot here on the picture. Yes, that is where it is. I didn't realize you're...
Yeah.
Yes, that is where it is. That little dot there
like
on
kind of green and
Brazil
shaded
map on the prayer card. Yes. So, she is living right now at Missionary Acres, and so Jeanette, who we introduced you to last week, my sister, who's working at Missionary Acres, she was able to get her story, and she's going to give us some more of these. So she already has people who are lined up and eager to tell us about their ministries while they were in different places. So Betty Walden was teaching at a school in Iowa, of all places. One of her students was a missionary kid and talked about a school in Brazil. So she visited Brazil, and God laid it on her heart to teach there full time. And she eventually stayed there and served for 26 years.
Wow. She
taught junior high and high school math and English. She was also the librarian. and many other things. She taught Sunday school on different levels. She taught Awana, youth group, and an English club. This was an outreach ministry where college students from all over the city would come to play wiffle ball and hear a Bible lesson and do some other things. 5 of the men she taught have now become pastors in Brazil.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and this picture that we showed you just a moment ago, that is one of the men who became a pastor, one of those 5. She said that just about everyone there speaks Portuguese, which, having been there, I would agree with that. And it is customary to take showers in the middle of the day because that's when everyone is hot and sweaty from work. Which is true. When I was there, we would take a mid-afternoon shower because it felt so nice just to cool off in that part of the country. In that culture, when you were invited to someone's house, they would typically offer you a shower because that was their custom, to take showers during the middle of the day. So they thought maybe you'd want one too, to be refreshed. Just like we wash our hands before mealtime, they would take showers before eating lunch. That is true.
That sounds pleasant.
Yep, it is nice. Just a nice cold shower. Let's see. One of the unique foods there was chicken pieces breaded into a fist-sized piece of meat and deep fried. I don't think I had that while I was there. That sounds good. It's called a drumstick in Portuguese, and it's shaped like a teardrop. Every meal includes rice and beans. Yep. Typically, some type of meat accompanied that, and for snack time, like in the afternoons, strong coffee with sugar, which they called cafezinho. So a little cup of coffee.
But a lot of sugar in that little cup of coffee?
Yes.
Jamie talks about that too.
She does. She
really
liked
sweet.
the really cold, sugary coffee. I did not like all that sugar.
No,
The
you didn't like
coffee.
the coffee.
I
You
didn't
would
like-
like the sugar.
Right, that's true. But I knew it was bad for me, so I didn't drink it. Jeanette asked her, on behalf of us, how the churches in that area are doing now, and she said they are thriving. Betty worked with 5 or so churches during her time there. She worked with a baby church to an almost dead church. She got to see all sorts of different types of churches. And that one that was almost dead was revived and eventually outgrew the building, and it is thriving today.
That's cool.
And she got to see the whole process and be part of it. One guy she taught went to seminary, returned, and now pastors that church.
Wow.
The seminary there was all American staff, and now it is almost completely Brazilian. And what's so cool is that Brazil is now sending their missionaries to other continents, especially some in Africa. I know this. There's some places where Americans can't really get in, but Brazilians, not too hard.
That's cool.
With another church she helped with, a man said that he would join their church, but only if they would help start a church in his part of the city. So the church leadership asked Betty to go across town and help start a Sunday school there. And a year later, evangelistic meetings were held in that home. And no Americans were involved in the church. It was all run by nationals. She just helped with the Sunday school. That was the start of the church. Eventually, services were started, property was bought, a building was constructed, and now the church is thriving today. Oh, so when she helped with that Sunday school, she was still in language school, so she didn't teach it. She would just drive the bus that loaded up the students for Sunday school.
Oh, cool.
So that's how it was all run by Brazilians. How can we pray for her now? Well, she asks for prayer for her health. She's a little older, and so she has a few different issues, and so she just needs strength each day. As I mentioned, she lives at Missionary Acres. When she moved to the States, she married Ed Walden, which is how she got that last name. And so now she continues to live there and serve. And she is thankful that she can still do ministry and that God has been able to work through her both in Brazil and now as she is living at Missionary Acres.
That's really cool. It's kind of like hearing a missionary story, but like the real life version from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
because it's like this is somebody, the life that they got to live.
Yeah.
Cool ways God worked through them.
Yep, and it's 26 years.
That's a long time of teaching school.
Yep, so she was faithful and didn't marry until she came back. And then she served together here.
That's really
Cool story.
Make sure you come back next week so you can learn a little bit more about New York, some more about our missionary story, and hear another story about a real life missionary.
Yep.
And what God's been doing.
Yep. We will see you next week.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.